Hey everyone, Ben France here. It's episode 12 of the Diary of an Anxious Therapist podcast. 12 episodes. Wow, we made it to a dozen. I know a couple weeks ago I had alluded to this being a Q&A episode, and then I was going to take a little bit of a break after episode 12. But quite frankly, I'm having too much fun doing this, and I kind of feel like I'm hitting my stride. So we're just going to roll forward. There will be a Q&A episode coming forward. So if you've submitted Qs for me to A, question. Yeah, Q's for me to A, although really I would say Q's for me to R, because one of my favorite quotes from Mirabai Starr, from a spiritual teacher that I love, is I don't have answers, I have responses. So maybe Q and R session, your questions and my responses. That will be coming in the future. So if you do have questions for me, you can always go ahead and submit those to me through any of the social media channels that I talk about at the end, the outro of these videos. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about identity and about how my identity is changing as I age and as my life unfolds, and how I think that might be applicable for some of, or realistically, probably all of you out there, and what I've learned from it and how I'm learning to lean into that. So maybe you can learn from some of my foibles, like I always talk about. So let's start with a story. What prompted this? Well, it is spring, early spring in my part of the world. I'm recording this the second week of April. This past Saturday was the first Saturday of April, pardon me. Drink of water for those of you not watching. It is actually water. It's not coffee for once, because I'm recording this at about 10 minutes after 7 in the evening. And as much as I really want coffee right now, that probably wouldn't be best decision when it comes to sleeping tonight. So we're sticking with water. So getting back to the point at hand, what prompted this thought to talk about identity and how that changes, and how our relationships to our identities can change? How my relationship to my identity, I had a very right in the face realization of that recently. This past Saturday, getting back to where I was before I stopped to take a drink of water and then ADD kicked in and I got a little off task there, was the first Saturday of April. That was also the season opener, I guess you could say, although it sounds weird because it's not a sporting event, but the first coffee and cars of the year in my local area, which is one of the bigger once a month car festival extravaganza, free car show type of things. As you know, if you've listened to any of my episodes in the past, or at least some of the episodes, I've always identified as kind of being a car guy. From an early age, it's been my thing. I've always loved reading about cars, driving cars, modifying cars, looking at cars, talking to friends about cars, playing video games about cars. Basically, if it had four wheels and tires and rolled, I was interested in it. So here we are now in 2024, my 47 going on 48th year on this world, and my 31st going on 32nd year of being legal age to drive. Cars and Coffee, or Coffee and Cars, was coming up. So I made the decision I was going to go hang out with a buddy of mine, and I was going to go to Coffee and Cars. So I spent most of the day before on Friday detailing and cleaning up my fun little weekend car, my little Mini Cooper that I have. And there's other things that go into that I may or may not talk about today. But got it all ready and was excited to go to Coffee and Cars and hang out with my car-loving brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and fathers and daughters, and insert whatever adjective or whatever descriptor here fits. So got up Saturday morning, was still excited about it, went and met my buddy at his place, and we drove over to Coffee and Cars. It was very busy. It was the first one of the year, so we probably should have expected it was going to be busy, but we got there a little late. It actually starts officially, I think, at 10 a.m. We got there at about 9:40-ish, and it was a madhouse of people. Our local Coffee and Cars is held in the parking lot of a very large church. If you're familiar with the Southwest Missouri area, it's Second Baptist Church in Springfield, Missouri. If you're not, just trust me when I say it's one of those mega churches. It's a huge building with a gigantic parking lot that you can fit hundreds, if not thousands, of cars on. So when we got there, realized how busy it was, spent about 20-25 minutes or so probably just driving around trying to find somewhere to park. My buddy got to park his car next to one of the booths because he just had a business do some work on his car, and so they wanted to kind of showcase it. And I was left to try to find a place to park, which after much searching and I finally found. So now I'm at the car show. Got out my trusty camera, i.e., iPhone, and started roaming around to look at cars because that's what you do at a car show. Something interesting happened to me in that moment, though. I was about maybe 20 minutes into walking around looking at cars and walking around looking at all the different cars there and being amongst all the people and the crowd of people. And I'm not going to say that that didn't play a role in what comes next, because there were a lot of people. And if you know me, even if this is your first episode, Diary of an Anxious Therapist gives you a little bit of insight into my temperament and the person that I can be at times. So it was a little bit overwhelming, the amount of people, but that wasn't the bigger thing. The thing I found myself realizing as I was walking around with my phone to take pictures of these cars was that I was kind of bored. I remember this being a thing that I loved doing and how much fun it was. And when I lived in Northeast Kansas, my first wife, my ex-wife, and I would go to car shows all the time, and I'd love walking around and talking to people about their cars and taking pictures of their cars and all of that stuff. And that just wasn't happening. So I've been there about 20, 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes walking around, and it just wasn't doing anything for me. And so I felt a little guilty because I made plans to hang out with my buddy that day, and we both kind of separated to go and catch up with some people and stuff. But at about 10:30, 10:45-ish, I just decided that, yeah, I think I've had my fill of this, even though it's like a 3-hour long show. It's supposed to go to 1 o'clock, and I think I'm done. And so I kind of sheepishly texted my buddy Chance and said, hey, man, a whole lot of people here. It's not really my scene, and I think I'm just going to go ahead and cut out early. So let's get together next week and hang out sometime over at your place or something. And that was a really weird, eye-opening, strange situation to find myself in. And I think it comes down to, actually, I know it does, because I spent a lot of time with this. I spent some time working through why this feeling came up to me. Why did it not feel the same as it used to? What was going on? What made me think that, yeah, this isn't really doing anything for me? And what I came to the conclusion of is that my identity and my interests and the things that I've always associated with being me are changing. And the thing that I noticed the most about this was that in this cars and coffee, or coffee and cars, I always say it backwards, extravaganza of 9 gazillion people, slight overstatement, but a lot. I'm in the Midwest, so there's a lot of American cars, but to give you an idea, just one type of car, there were probably 30 Corvettes there. So there were hundreds of cars there and probably thousands of people there. The thing I realized was I love hanging out with my buddy Chance. Chance is a car buddy. We talk about cars a lot. Almost every time we got together at my place, we've watched a car-related movie, like the movie Rush or the movie about Lamborghini, or we went and saw the Ferrari biopic that came out back in January. So we're always talking about cars and stuff like that, and that's awesome, and I love that. But this coffee and cars thing was doing nothing for me. And what I think I realized is what shifted in me as I've gotten older is that it's not about the cars anymore. It's about the connection with people. Whereas in years past, I could just completely nerd out and be super excited about, look at this car and these modifications, this motor it has in it. And oh, and this is a 1996 Nissan 300ZX and it's twin turbo, and they only imported X amount of those. And that's so cool, and blah, 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 blah. There's part of me, and I feel really bad admitting, I don't feel bad. It feels weird admitting this. Then now I'm kind of like, it's a car. It's got 4 wheels. It rolls. Somewhere, if my ex ever hears me say that, she will laugh, because that's what she used to say to me when I get excited about cars 20 years ago. But so what I discovered is it's the connection to people that what matters to me. I really value my friendship with my buddy Chance, not because Chance has a cool car, not because Chance and I can talk about cars, But because Chance and I have this connection and we're on the same wavelength on something and we feel connected and it feels effortless and it feels like there's a real relationship there and there's a real back and forth and there's a real I get you and you get me type of thing going. So, yeah, maybe my identity's shifting. So, I guess what I would say to that, and this is, we're still early in this podcast, but I put this in my notes. I'm looking at my outline because I say this every episode for some reason, because I know that I kind of look at my outline as opposed to looking directly at the camera like this. I do this sometimes. But I'd offer up the idea that seems to be true for me that what once defined us may not always define us. What was my identity? The things that I thought made me me, maybe that changes over time. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's more than okay. Maybe that's to be expected. And maybe I should embrace that as opposed to pushing back on that. Maybe I shouldn't question why am I not excited about cars anymore like I used to be? Why am I not excited about working on cars and modifying cars like I used to be? Maybe I should just say, hey, that was cool and I had a lot of fun with that. And that was part of my past. And I have a lot of awesome memories and a lot of fun experiences with friends and road trips and things I wouldn't change for the world. But maybe at 48 years old, almost 48 years old, I'm at a different place in my life now. Maybe that doesn't define me like it used to. Maybe it doesn't have the same allure that it used to. Maybe it's not as big of a thing for me as it once was. And maybe, just maybe, the reason that that's not as big of a thing as it once was because this guy, pointing at myself for those of you that are listening and not watching, maybe this guy is getting more comfortable in his own skin with who he is, and so he doesn't have to be identified by his things. What was my identity in the past? What did I identify myself as? If people would say, "Hey, who are you? What type of person are you?" I would have said, "I'm a car guy. I'm a musician." When I was married to my first wife, I would say very much, "I am a husband to X person. I am her husband." That's a huge part of my identity. I am really good friends with this person. I am this. I am that. What's the common theme that is coming out of that? To an extent, a lot of those things aren't about me. Car guy. I have a cool car. Great, that's an object. Musician. Yeah, that's more personal, and that one still resonates with me. But ultimately, guitar player. I own a Hamer USA made guitar that was $1,000 brand new 35 years ago, and it's probably worth $2,500 now, blah, 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 blah. I am a husband to my first wife. Not, I am Ben France, and these are my hopes and these are my dreams, but I'm a husband. Not, it really resonates with me, and I love connecting with people and feeling like I see them and they see me. But man, we both like cars. And maybe that's a little bit of semantics, some people might say, but I don't think it is. I think there's more to it than that. I think that when we're growing as people, and this doesn't mean growing meaning a specific age, because I've met some amazingly well-centered, very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Mature. I hate that word. It makes me cringe to say it. But I've met some very well-centered, very mature 21, 22, 23-year-olds. And I've met some extremely not mature, fumbling around trying to figure out life 50 and 60-year-olds. So when I say maturity, I don't mean maturity in the sense of your chronological age or anyone's chronological age. I mean in the becoming mature and comfortable in my own skin type of way. So that brings an interesting question, because we always want to slap labels on things because that makes it easy for us to wrap our heads around, and it's a lot easier to say I am a this or I am a that. So what would I say my identity is now? Well, I would say I'm a therapist. That's an easy label to slap on me because it's what I do, it's my job. I would say I am a partner. I'd say I'm a different type of partner than I was in my first marriage. Very much being a partner meant that life was all about that person. And as long as their needs were met, then everything was okay. Whereas now I feel very much like I am a partner and we're in this together. And that has nothing to do with my ex. That is 100% my stuff. Nobody put that on me but me. We could talk about my childhood and so on. I've talked about that in some previous episodes. But ultimately, I'm not blaming her for that. That's how I identified as her husband at that time. What else am I right now? I am a spiritual seeker. This is a big one for me. I'm really, as I get older, wrapping my head around and spending a lot of time with the spiritual type of questions, of meaning of life type of questions, and what happens when we die and those types of things. So I would say that would be a part of my identity, or at least a label that would fit my identity now. What is important to me? Calm and tranquility is probably of the most paramount importance to me. Life being calm, life feeling peaceful, life feeling tranquil. So that's also part of my identity now. So why am I talking about that? Why am I saying that my identity was that I'm a car guy and now I'm a spiritual seeker? It was that I am a husband, quote unquote, to my wife. Now I am a partner to my wife. Now my identity is wanting to have calm and tranquility and peacefulness in my life. Why do I say that? Why do I bring those things up to contrast them, compare and contrast them? Because change like this can be hard. It can be hard to reckon with. It's hard for me to reckon with, and I'm sure there are plenty of people out there listening to this that get that as well too. We get so attached to our identities of what we think our life is supposed to be, or of the person we think we're supposed to be, that it can be hard to let those go. Rephrase that into the first person. I'm going to read exactly how I put in my notes here. Giving up on an old supposed to, or on things that I've identified with so long, can be hard to do. Another thing that goes along with that is recognizing that while I can do anything, and I truly believe within reason that's the case, you're probably not going to see this guy float through the air tomorrow. Hopefully won't offend anybody by saying this, but I'm probably not going to walk on water tomorrow. But part of this identity and part of this change as I'm aging, and part of this recognizing how my identity is changing, is recognizing the fact that while I can maybe do anything, I can't do everything. How does that tie into my identity? Well, that can very much tie into where I want to put my effort and where I want to put my energy and my identity. Do I want to be the car guy who builds a really cool car and takes his Mini Cooper and modifies it and takes that little hatchback and makes 400 horsepower out of it? And yes, it can happen for those of you who think I'm crazy, but there's plenty of test cases out there. And I want to spend all my weekends working on my car and doing stuff like that and making it fast and going and showing it at car shows and so on and so forth. Yeah, I can want to do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing I've got to recognize with that, though, is that there's an opportunity cost for that. I talked about this in a prior episode. Can't do everything. So is that part of my identity? Does that feel like such a core part of me that I need to hold on to it so hard and honor it so hard that I have to let other things go that maybe feel more important to me? These are the type of questions that I've been asking myself when I'm wrestling. Man, when I'm wrestling, I was going to say wrestling, and I was going to say when I wrestle, and somehow it came out wrestling. I am from the Midwest US, folks, and it just showed itself there. Drink time. Cheers. Water. My second favorite beverage behind coffee, although I probably am out of balance on which one I should be drinking more of, at least in recent months. But I digress. So, change, giving up what we thought and what we thought would always be part of our identities, can be a hard thing to do. I've talked about music before and talk about the idea that I'm going to be a musician and that's what I was going to be for my life. Giving that up, or making peace with the fact that maybe that just will be a part of me, but that won't be the totality of me. That won't be the defining characteristic of me. That can be a hard thing to come to terms with at times. But come to terms with it doesn't mean that I'm giving up on it, meaning I don't think it can happen. I mean, come to terms with it as in maybe it's not my top priority anymore. Maybe it doesn't carry the weight that it once did. And that's weird to say that, But I think that it's true. I know the car guy thing, that's very true. Prime example. On Sunday, the day after Coffees and Cars, I pulled my daily driver, my '04 Honda Accord that my parents pretty much have given us at this point because they don't have anywhere to keep it anymore. Pulled it in the garage and I was going to start taking it apart because I need to replace the motor mounts in it because it's 20 years old and has 175,000 miles. Got it as far as getting it in the garage and didn't get any farther than that and thought about it. And this opportunity cost concept came up to me. And I started thinking, I don't really care if I'm the guy who can work on his car himself and who can change the motor mounts in his car and get it back in tip-top shape at 47 and a half, 48 years old. I would much rather have my time to do other things with, take money, and pay somebody that's what they do to do that thing. And that sounds kind of silly, and maybe it sounds like it's trivial, maybe it sounds like it's just a financial decision. But to me, it's not. There's a prideful part of me that for a long time I identified with, I'm not going to pay somebody to do that. I can do it myself. And I'm smart and I know I can figure out how to do it. Give me a service manual, blah, 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 blah. 23 years ago, I can remember, or 22 years ago, I can remember me and a very good friend of mine at the time, who were car guys, who had very little experience working on cars other than changing the oil on our cars and probably rotating our tires. Didn't know how to do anything else. But he was a very intelligent guy, and I like to think I'm not a stupid guy. Some people would say that I'm downplaying that, but I don't have much of an ego in that regards. But I remember both of us having the conversation and saying, we can buy a service manual. We can buy tools. You're smart. I'm smart. We could probably figure it out. Why would we pay somebody else to do it? That made sense at that time. And once I got where I could really do these things 2 years ago when I did a complete rebuild of a car from kind of ground up, that was awesome and I loved it. And I felt very proud of the fact that I was able to do that. But you know what? Now that I've been down that road, kind of like, the cost isn't worth it to me. I'd rather have my time for something that feels more meaningful. I'm no longer wrapped up in being someone who knows how to work on cars as my identity, that I'm willing to sacrifice my time with people that I love and doing things that feel more meaningful to me in order to scratch that itch and be able to have the certified YouTube mechanic badge on my shoulder. So there's an example of that. So let's talk a little bit about how can we actually, or how have I, trying to keep it in the first person like I always do, and hopefully it goes without saying that you can extrapolate all these things to you by substituting, there we go, substituting we for I or me for him. But how can I shift these things in my identity and my priorities and be okay with that while still honoring the past and honoring what's in my life in the past and what I spent my time, what I identified with in the past? First one is what I can't do if I want to make that shift and still honor the past and honor that that was my identity and I was a car guy for a long time, is I can't berate myself for past wants that no longer carry any weight with me or no longer carry the same weight with me. A lot of people live in the past. And there are people that would say, I've been a car guy for my whole life and now I'm at 47 years old and I've decided I'm not a car guy. So man, look at all the time I wasted from 16 years old to 47 that I could have been doing other things. That was stupid. Why do I do that? Why do I start working on these projects just to realize I don't want to work on them anymore? What good does that do? Berating myself for that past isn't going to change it. Maybe it's a matter of just accepting that that was something that I loved at that time. And it's no longer something that I love as much anymore, and that's okay. How else can I make that shift while honoring the past? I can recognize that those things served a purpose. And even if they don't serve that same purpose any longer, they're still part of my story and still part of my journey. I'm a very big believer, and if you happen to be one of my clients that we've worked together and you're listening to this, insert eye rolls here. They've heard me say this many times, that everything that I did up to this very moment right now led me to this place that I am at in my life. So those things served a purpose. Being a car guy for 30 plus years served a purpose. I had a lot of awesome experiences doing that. I had friendships that some of those I still have friendships with. Some of those I've lost over the years because people grow apart. But I had amazing experiences. I got to go see things that I'd never see. I took trips and road trips out of state with friends and things that I've never did before. Those things all become a part of me, and those things are all a part of my journey and of what have led me to this moment right now. Had I not went down that road of spending hours upon hours and hundreds and thousands, and that was hundreds and thousands, not hundreds of thousands. I've never had that kind of budget, and I probably never will, and I'm okay with that. But I digress. I've spent hundreds and possibly thousands of hours working on cars in the past, modifying cars, going to car shows, hanging out with car buddies, insert anything automotive related here. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. If I hadn't done that, that might not have got me to the place to where now it feels to me like that's not as important to me. And while it's still fun, other things feel more important. It's all part of my journey. It's all a part of my story. Another thing that I've been working on shifting, making that shift from old identity to new identity while still honoring the past is something I talked about briefly, kind of touched on a couple minutes ago when I was talking about the musician thing. And I'm going to read it exactly off of my notes here because this feels super important and it feels like not like a brilliant statement, but it felt very important to me when I wrote it. I can stop clinging so tightly to what the expected path of my life was. I can forgive myself for any mistakes that may have affected that path from not going the way I thought it was going to. And then I can be open to what is new and what's unfolding in front of me. Don't cling so tight to those things in the past that we thought were going to define us. That's just another example of living in the past. And when I do that, what am I doing? I'm not living in this present moment right now. And if I'm not living in this present moment, I truly believe in some ways I'm not really living then. The past is gone. I can't change it. I can look back on it fondly, and I'm sure there's nothing even wrong with looking back on it on regret in some ways. That's fine. But if I'm clinging so tightly to this is what my life was supposed to be, this is how it was supposed to go, these were the experiences I was supposed to have, this is the person that I was supposed to be, how am I ever going to enjoy this moment right now and see the possibilities of what my life can be going forward? So I think what it's about is it's about acceptance. It's about accepting the fact that our life for 99.999999 ad nauseum decimal points of us, it's not a straight line. It is a journey. We're not going point A to point B as the crow flies, to use kind of silly, annoying language. We weave and we turn and we curve and we go up hills and we go down hills and we think we're aiming for this thing and then maybe we hit something else instead. And we think that we're going to be the next Eddie Van Halen or Steve Vai in the world, and we end up being a guitar player who hangs out and plays guitar in his house on the weekends because he enjoys it. We think we're going to be the next Pulitzer Prize winning poet, and we end up being somebody who still loves poetry, but we share our poetry on Threads or on Instagram or something like that. It's okay. It's the journey that matters. It's not the destination. It's not how many turns, unexpected or not, happen along the way. The journey itself is what matters. And I think that's what's the most important. So when I think about identity, going back to where we started today, I want to go back to, I think one of the first things, if I didn't say it, I'm going to read it right now because it's in my notes and it feels once again like a pretty important, pat myself on the back, wise thing to say. Not really. Once again, you know, I have very little ego in regards to myself that way if you've ever listened to this podcast. But I think I made up this one myself. I don't think I got this from somewhere else, but regardless, it feels accurate. What once defined us may not always define us, and that's okay. And the more we cling onto that, the more we fight and kick and scream and say, that is supposed to be my life, the more we're going to struggle. The more we learn to accept it, and the more this guy, going back to first person, the more I learned to say, that's what I thought my life was going to be, but I didn't take that left turn at Albuquerque. I went this direction instead. The happier the more content, the more peaceful, the more calm, the more tranquil I feel in my life. And consequently, the more my life seems to open up and opportunities seem to open up for me. So that's it for today. I have no idea how long this is. I didn't start a timer when I started recording. I just started timing. And if you've watched before, like I said, at least within about the past 7 episodes or so, I think, this is all outlined, not scripted, and kind of off the cuff, meaning that I don't edit it. If I stumble along the way with my words, if I make a mistake, that's okay. I'm human. We make mistakes. If my cat, that you probably saw jump up over there on that window seat, goes trotting across the screen, yes, I could take the time to go in and DaVinci Resolve and I could edit that out so it doesn't look there. But why? This is real life. Life gets messy. Life doesn't go perfect. But you know what? If you lean into acceptance and if you lean into the fact that life is this journey that can be enjoyable and can be fun, regardless of whether or not it's the journey you thought it was going to be, regardless of whether or not your life is the life you thought it was going to be, it gets really good, folks. So I guess that's it. I just want to finish this like I always do by saying that I wish you all nothing but peace, love, and happiness in your lives. And once again, because I'm reclaiming that part of me that I felt shamed for a while to express, but I'm not going to let that shame hold me back anymore. From the part of me that is undying and eternal to the part of you that is undying and eternal, I say namaste. Take care, everyone. I love you all.